Hey there, it's Martin. Today I'd like to tell you my story, and it's the story of the certain hope that I have in Jesus. To make the storytelling a bit interesting, I thought I'd use some emojis. Let's get straight into it. When I was a kid, I was told about the importance of hard work. I needed to work hard because it would lead to a good result. I didn't simply focus on the now, but I would step back to see the bigger picture. I work hard now because it leads to a good result. For example, I was told about the importance of studying hard. I study hard now so that I could get a good result, the good result of marks, good marks. I would work hard now to get good marks. I saw that I could keep stepping back to see an even bigger picture. Why should I get good marks? Well, it's so that I could get into uni. And why should I get into uni? Why should I work hard at getting a good degree? It's so that I could get a good job. I could become rich, have a nice house, have a happy family. You can see me there with my blonde hair and my blonde wife. This approach was about stepping back to see the bigger picture, to see how this hard work now would lead to good results in the future. But the big thing about this approach is that if you keep stepping back to see the bigger picture, you'll see a big problem. And I saw this big problem, this problem of death. I saw that it didn't matter what I did in my life would ultimately end up in death. It didn't matter whether I lived a happy life or I lived a sad one, I was ultimately going to die. It didn't matter whether I became really smart or was a fool, I was going to die. It didn't matter whether I worked really hard to become rich or I was a poor person. Life would end in death. I saw the meaninglessness of life because of death. Life seemed to be meaningless because it didn't matter what I did in my life, I would ultimately die. Now, some people have given me different approaches to dealing with this problem. And I saw that one approach was to acknowledge that life actually is ultimately meaningless, but to create my meaning. And so I could say, I would become the best artist. I'd put my meaning in art. Or I could become a great soccer player and put my meaning in soccer. But the problem with this approach was that this meaning that I came up with was ultimately just a useful fiction. It might work for a time, but it had no objective foundation. It was simply based on a lie. Well, a second approach I came across was to ignore death, to forget about it, to suppress the truth. And this approach does work quite well for the meantime. It's much easier to be happy when you're not thinking about death all the time. It's much easier to work hard at something when you can see that it does lead to a good result in the near future. When you don't think about how ultimately none of it really matters because it'll end in death. But the thing is, this is also based on a lie. It's based on ignorance. And we're surrounded by sickness, by people dying. We're surrounded by reminders that do point us back to the reality of death. And so this approach didn't seem to work for me either. Now, when I was a university student, this wasn't simply an intellectual problem for me, but I really felt the meaninglessness of life because of death. I really felt it. And during this time, well, I called myself a Christian, but I was doubting my faith. See, Christians say that the answer to this big problem of the meaninglessness of life because of death is found in life after death, in God. But I didn't simply want to believe in Christianity because it was comforting. I wanted to believe or not believe because of the truth of it. And so during this time, I was struggling with two big questions. The first, is there meaning in life in light of death? And the second, is Christianity true? And I thought I could answer the first question by possibly finding an answer to the second question, by seeing whether there is truth in Christianity. And so I did some research. I read lots of books. I listened to podcasts, listened to people and their different perspectives. I read up on philosophy, on the origins of the universe, on morality. I looked into the historicity of the Bible, on the historical evidence for Jesus. And I read the Bible as well. And all of this actually created a cumulative case, a lot of evidence that pointed me back to the truth of Christianity. I came to see that what I had been taught about Jesus, about him being the Son of God, who died and rose again, was actually true. But how did this point me back to the first question on the meaninglessness of life because of death? What did Christianity have to say about the meaninglessness of life because of death? Well, I saw that, or we knew before, life does end in death. But I also saw that death was a result of us turning away from God in our life. We have turned away from God, and because of that, the appropriate result of that is death. But I saw something worse, that we deserve eternity separated from God. We have turned away from God, are going to die, and we deserve eternity separated from God. Which sounded really hopeless and terrible. But I also saw Jesus. I saw Jesus was the Son of God who lived a perfect life, who didn't deserve to die and didn't deserve eternity separated from God. And yet, he willingly went to the cross. He took the punishment for us so that we may have eternal life. And I've chosen this picture of a tree because it's a tree of life. It represents eternity with God, eternity with God's people, in a place where there's no more pain and suffering. Eternity with God. We who have turned away from God, who will die and deserve eternity separated from God, can actually, through Jesus' death on the cross, be made right with God and have eternity with him. And so I saw that what I did in my life now actually does make a difference. I will still die, but after death, there are two options: of eternity separated from God or eternity with God. I saw that what I do now, whether I trust in Jesus or I don't, makes a big difference in these two options. And I also saw that that affects how I interact with other people too. Because I didn't want them eternally separated from God either. I wanted to see people with me in eternity with God. And so if you're someone who trusts in Jesus, then I want to encourage you. We have this great comfort knowing that we do have eternity with God. Even though we will die, our life is meaningful because what we do now does affect the future, eternity with God. And if you're someone who doesn't trust in Jesus at the moment, then I really implore you to do the research yourself. Figure out whether there is truth in this or not. Figure out whether what I'm saying actually has evidence for it or not. I'd love to chat to you about it. Or maybe ask some other friends. Do your own research. Because this really is a matter of eternal life with God or eternity separated from God. Well, that's my story. It's my story of my hope in Jesus. And whether you found it encouraging or challenging, whether you have any comments or questions, I'd really love to hear what you think. Shoot me a message, give me a call. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay safe and I hope you have a great week.